Good day out there to all my listeners, and I'd like to welcome you to Is Your Way in Your Way. And I'm your host, and my name is Cassandra Crawley, Mayo. And this podcast it's more about empowering women to, to, to break through internal barriers, redefine your success on your own terms, and start living with purpose and meaning. When life does not go according to your plan, it's really about what I would call choosing the rooted joy, choosing life's rooted joy or happiness, however you want to share it, joy or happiness, and also authenticity and fulfillment instead of just going through the motions every day. Like I remember when I was in corporate, if I would work 10 hours or more. Hey, I don't even know what an 8-hour day would look like, but I was so exhausted. I'd come home, eat something, go to bed, get up, catch a flight. Everything was just, everything was motion. It wasn't an action that really truly meant a lot to me after a while doing that. So today what I would say is we talk about topics related to, of course, empowering, self-reflection, and also just things that enable you to look in the mirror and say, you know what, I've been here. I see this. And I'm actually going to break through. So today we're talking about discovering purpose after seasons of brokenness and poor choices. Trust me. So I'm gonna introduce you to my guest today. But the bio I'm gonna read is really less about credentials, and it's gonna be more about a story of transformation. So, for example, have you ever felt like your past mistakes, painful experience, or broken places were disqualifying you from the life God intended for you? What those experiences were really your foundation of your greatest transformation. You may not believe that, but think about it. So today we're going to talk with a woman by the name of Pat Domangue. And also, we are going to talk about her journey from darkness to divine purpose. Is going to inspire countless women to embrace your healing, discover your wholeness, and step boldly into God's calling. So from that, I like to welcome Pat to the stage. Hi, Pat Domangue. How are you?
I'm very good, Cassandra. Thank you for inviting me to come on your show today and
Yeah,
share some of my story.
it's a blessing to have you on my show today. Wow. I'm gonna read a little bit, not all, bio, so people, my listeners, will kind of understand what qualifies you to kind of talk about this brokenness, that we're talking about, and discovering your purpose. So Pat is a ministry leader. She's a woman's ministry leader, Bible study author, faith-filled encourager who has spent more than 20 years helping women move from brokenness to wholeness. Man, transformed by God's grace at age 30, she now inspires women to overcome life's barriers, deepen their faith, and embrace the purpose God has for their lives. She's written and published 3 Bible studies. My Maker and Me is what that's all about. We can't wait to hear. So Pat, my audience knows that I often talk about barriers that keep us from what I say reaching our true potential or living our best life on our terms or looking back on our journey that was our biggest barrier standing between us. Um, so what happened when you were 30 years old?
Well, when I was 30 years old is when I encountered the Lord,
Okay.
and my life was changed in that point, but it was a slow journey. But
Uh-huh.
before leading up to that, I had really lived, I was raised in church and raised
Right.
to have a relationship with the Lord, but I just was very rebellious and
Mm-hmm.
hard-headed and determined I was going to do life my way, and it didn't turn out really well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I had a lot of shame, a whole lot of baggage, and just mess in my life. I was really broken. And I one night had an encounter with the Lord. I had started going back to church, and we were doing a Bible study, and we were actually doing a Bible study about the book of Revelation.
Mm.
And I always say, if you do any Bible study in the book of Revelation, you will meet Jesus. So, and I
Okay.
did. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one night in the middle of the night at home by myself, and just had this encounter with the Lord where I had all of the moments of my life that were dark and ugly and things that I wished I didn't even remember and hoped that no one else would ever have to know.
Mm-hmm.
And in that night, the Lord gave me the words, that as far as the east is from the west, he's cast my sin. He would not remember my sin anymore. He would transform me from, even though my sins were as scarlet, that I would
Yeah.
be white as snow. So all of those kind of words were things that he spoke to me during that night, which it was still a long process of really seeing what that truly meant. And
Mm-hmm.
I love your is your way in your way, because all of that baggage and that old life, that shame and that brokenness, I carried that with me into my new life with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, I say a lot of times, it really paralyzed me from really stepping into what he wanted me to step into.
Mm.
So it was definitely in my way.
Okay. Okay. So, Pat, perhaps I should have asked this question first. Tell us a little bit about your backstory, because your backstory has a lot to do with where you are today. And then as we go through that, we may find that all of that back stuff was necessary to make you who you are today. Would you
Yes.
mind sharing some of it?
Yeah, no, I don't mind at
Okay.
all
Okay.
sharing. So I was, like I said, raised in church.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
then at age 13, I was sexually assaulted. And
Mm-hmm.
that was one of those points that just transformed my identity. I
Mm-hmm.
became, in my mind, I was a bad person. That
Right.
happened to me because I was a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
And I carried that identity with me for many, many years. And I carried that identity with me even after I met the Lord for a
Sure.
long time, until he
Sure.
began to show me through his word that that's not what he says about me.
Okay.
So that was the probably the core malfunction of
Sure.
my story. And it tainted everything for me. I mean, I was married, got pregnant and got married at 16, then got a divorce 6 months later. So at 17 years old, I've got failure already.
Mm-hmm.
And then met man number two at 19 in a bar. That was kind of the life I was living. And just, anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that ended up just carrying on through until finally I had that encounter at 30 years old. And,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I always do when I go and I speak and share, because now, I've been to seminary, I've got seminary degrees, I've got Bible studies that I've written and all that.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times, because it's been so long since that was my life, that I think a lot of times people look at me and think, oh, this is easy for her. She, and it wasn't. I mean, it was a long process of transformation and some really difficult, hard things to go through, but I was able to overcome. But I think I was able to overcome by what the transformation of God's word and the Holy Spirit living in me.
When you were going through, as I walked through the valley of the shadow of death, while doing that, did you ever feel like, did you cry out to God? Because you've been in the church, so that foundation was there. And while there's sometimes when people, if you heard the story about God, Jesus, then you hear about the devil, so did you, during that time before your pivotal moment, were you crying out to him? Did you like want to just go somewhere and hide? Because tell us about that experience, because before he spoke to you, although he knew he was going to give you some revelational knowledge for sure, what was going on before that? Like I said, were you crying out to him, or did you want to give up? Did you want to go hide? Tell us about that.
Well, I'll go all the way back to the situation where at 13, whenever I was sexually assaulted. 2 weeks later, this is something I don't talk about a whole lot, but I share it sometimes, but this feels like the right moment to share it. I attempted to take my own life. I had been raised very sheltered, and I thought that because that happened to me, it meant I was pregnant. I was 13. I was young. I didn't know what that, so I didn't have any clue of what I was facing. And so I attempted to take my own life. And I remember that night in that room. And honestly, when I vividly remember that night, and I remember I felt evil presence in there. But in that, I called out to the Lord and I said, and this was way before I come to the Lord. Sure. I said, if you will save me from this, I will never do this again. And he did. Yeah. Now, it was not a good next few, little bit of time. But but that was the time that I cried out to the Lord. And there was several times, when my daddy died, I didn't think I could survive it because he was just my greatest love of my life, was my daddy. And I didn't think I was going to survive that. I called out to the Lord during that time. So there were several times that I would call out to the Lord, but the problem was I always believed I was too bad. I was not worthy of his presence. I wasn't worthy of him to do anything beyond just save me out of that moment, out of that circumstance, but I've found something totally different in walking with him. So I don't know if that answers exactly what you're asking.
Yeah, it does. It does. Because what I wanted to be able to do is for you to share with the listeners the traumatic. It was traumatic. I mean, it's kind of like dying to self, maybe, and that's a painful death,
Right.
And I wanted them to hear, although you go through, because we're all going to go through something.
Yes.
And you did cry out, he knew your heart, and he also had a purpose for you. So he worked all things out for good for those who love him according to his riches and glory.
Absolutely.
And so that's what happened. So when he gave you this revelation from the book of Revelation, it took you a moment to say, okay, I surrender. Okay, this is it. All right, I'm going to help women discover their faith. So once you got that revelation, how did you get into helping women after you've been broken down so much?
Yeah. Well, it took me, I would say, 5 years from the time of my encounter with the Lord to be free of my past. I was still an alcoholic. But I was in the Word, drinking and read my Bible, just trying to get it in. Because, you know, one of the things I always say that the Lord did for me whenever he came into my life is he gave me this understanding. If I would ever be free of my past, my hope was in Jesus. And so because of that, I went to church and I read my Bible. Those are the two things I knew to do. And that was it. So I did it. Until one day, the Lord, once again, I have this other encounter with the Lord. I have been really wrestling with him. He's changed so much of my life. I'm about 5 years in, and there had been like a 2-year battle of him trying to get me to release the alcohol. And I was just like, not that you drank. If you drank, I can drink, you know. So that's kind of how I laid it out to the Lord. And there was one particular moment that we had gone to church one morning. I had had my 2 bottles of wine to drink the night before, went to church with my hangover, just as very common and normal in those days, carrying all the shame and all of that. And my Sunday school teacher, I don't know if y'all have Sunday school where you are, but in the day that I'm talking about, we still had Sunday school, and they don't do that as much now. Well, anyway, whenever I sat down in there, the teacher got up and he put his Bible on the little stand and he just looked at it for like a whole minute, and it's just silence in the room. And you're in a room of 30 people, and silence for a whole minute when you're expecting somebody to talk seems like a long time. So everybody's really paying attention. And he said, the word of the Lord is, I've been knocking and I have been knocking. I'm about to give you over to that thing which you so desire. And I'm just telling you, that was straight to my heart. I knew that he was saying, let it go. I've called you and it's time, you know. So I did. I went home. It was crying. I was on my face crying over it, you know, threw all the alcohol in my house away. It just went with it. And so that particular time, in that next year, the Lord began to teach me that I could trust him. And he began to teach me that he really loved me, and that and he used my kids. I love how God uses our kids a lot of times. You know, we love our kids so much. We want the best for them. We would do anything for them. And so he used my love for them to show me, I love you so much more than you can love them. I want the best for you so much more than you can want the best for them. And there was just, at some point, and he just kept saying, will you trust me? And at some point I just said, all right, I get it. Yes, you're trustworthy. You love me this much. I'm going all in. And so because of my experience, and then this was just such a freeing thing for me. I mean, all the old life was gone. I was able to walk in this freedom because I knew the word, and because I knew what God's word said about me. And so I couldn't help but want to see other women experience what I had experienced.
Okay.
You know?
And that's part of why you went into the ministry and you went to school, and you had a thirst for that?
Oh, yes. I mean, I definitely had the Lord, once again, another encounter with the Lord in one particular night when God showed me that he had called me to ministry. I did not know what that meant. I was clueless, you know, and I had 3 kids and life was nuts. And my seminary experience was kind of wild because it took me 8 years to get a bachelor's degree because I was driving to seminary 4.5 hours away from home while my husband was being Mr. Mom. And so it was just a wild life for a while. So it took me a while to get that degree and all that, but I felt like I needed that. I think a lot of the reason that I felt like I needed that was because of my past, and I needed I needed people to see I'm in, you know, because I had really lived out loud, an ugly life out loud. It wasn't private. So,
well, how do you get women? You know, because there are a lot of us listeners, and I've been there too, broken. You know, like, what am I doing? Why am I here? I'm even like, why am I here? How do you help women discover how faith healing becomes a pathway to transformation, like yourself?
well, it's based on my experience. I am sharing out of what I have experienced, and what I have experienced has been a complete deliverance, healing, transformation that has come to me. I've experienced it through a relationship with Jesus through his word. And, you know, there's like, I didn't go to any kind of rehab to get free of alcohol. I went to the word. I didn't, you know, all the brokenness from being sexually assaulted and then the failures of marriage and all of that. I didn't have any kind of professional help that got me free of it. I just had a relationship with the Lord. So out of that, that's why I write Bible studies, because I mean, it like radically made a difference in my life. And I know that what I've experienced, there's women that could have it, you know, and so I want to give it to them. So that's a lot of why I do what I do, because I really believe it.
Right, absolutely. So for my listeners that are not in your space right now, they don't come to your classes, not that they can't now because you want to give them information, but those women that are stuck and they know that, you know, you get to a point where you get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yes.
Like, okay, this is it. this is it. What can you tell my listeners how to start the transformation?
Well, the first thing is just faith is simple. It's just simply believing. You know, you've got to believe that there is hope for you, that there is another experience for you, that just because your circumstances have been one thing doesn't write the story of your whole life unless you let it. I think is your way in your way. We have to determine within ourselves, because I came to that place of, I just didn't want the rest of my life to just be one mess after another, because I lived it long enough, you know, and I got sick and tired of it. And so we have to realize, and so a lot of times we have to do something different than, you know, the story that's coming to my mind right now is in John 5. There's a man that is by the pool of Bethesda. And he's been laying there for 38 years, lame, and doing the exact same thing over and over again, and not getting any kind of different results. And the thing that's interesting with that story is that Jesus comes to this place and he encounters this man and he asks him, do you want to get well? Because we have to determine, do we want it? And when I look up that, because I've studied that story, when I looked up that original language word, it is like, do you have the resolve? You know, because I think about my mother when she was here still, she's with Jesus now, but she used to say, you have to have some intestinal fortitude. And I don't know if I always understood what that means. But sometimes that's what it is. We've just got to say, you know what? I don't want this anymore. And we've got to push through and do whatever it takes to get that, to grasp it. But all it is then, to make it simple, it's just saying yes to Jesus and walking the thing out.
Right, right. You got to believe, and you got to make a
Yes.
decision.
You've got
So,
to make a decision.
what
Yes.
does it mean to become the woman God created you to be?
Well, I think I don't know if there is any possibility that we can do that apart from knowing what he says about us. I mean,
Hmm.
how do we become who he wants us to be if we don't have a clue of what the word says about us? Because the word tells us all
Hmm.
kind of good stuff about us.
Hmm.
Well, we can
Hmm.
choose to go, we want to look at the things that we don't like about it, but
Yeah.
the word has good things. I'm blessed. It says Ephesians 1 is a passage that you just, oh my goodness, if you read nothing but that first chapter of
Uh-huh.
Ephesians, it's incredible that we're blessed with every spiritual blessing. We're forgiven, we're redeemed, we're accepted in the beloved,
Hmm.
we're accepted into God's family. So there's so many things that we have to start realizing that when Jesus comes into our life, then he re-identifies us. We're
Right.
not who we were. I'm not that person. I'm a
That's
new
right.
creation in Christ Jesus. I am becoming the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. So I
That's right.
get to stand on the truth of what he says.
Hmm. Hmm. That's good. It's kind of like, I have a passage in my book titled, my name of my book is Your Way in Your Way. And I said, first of all, what do you have to lose if life
Mm,
has you in a bad place? Why
yes.
not try God? I mean,
Yes.
what do you have to lose? And you reminded me of a story I had. I at one time in my life was very depressed. And I was in the word, going to church, all of that. So first of
Mhm.
all, but if you love me, why am I feeling like this?
Yeah.
Number one, I don't
Yeah.
get it. And then I started praying and I said, have you ever been depressed, Jesus? I mean, have you ever felt
Mm,
downtrodden? I get
mm,
a passage in my book. It's called "Who's Ever Doubted Whether There Was a God," and I have a
mm.
story there. But this story I'm going to share now is I was like, okay, if you've been feeling like I feel, then I guess it's okay. But I don't know whether you felt like this. The next morning, reading my devotions, I read about God at Gethsemane. He was
Mm,
crying out for his
mm,
father to take the cup away from him. Not
mm,
once,
right.
twice, 3 times. And when I read that, I said, oh, you have
It
been
was.
sad.
Mhm.
Nobody was paying you attention. You asked them to sit with
Mm,
you. So things like that will happen that only you know is for
right.
you because
Yeah.
of what you have experienced. So I get the stories. So in other words, we like, well, let's just try him. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, yeah. Who have been some of your most influential people in your life as you're walking with the Lord?
When I very first came to the Lord, it really was my mother-in-law was a huge influence
Okay.
and really impacted me. And you know, I was a hairdresser for 20 years before I came to know the Lord. And I just think back on the many times that I heard stories about mother-in-laws and how it wasn't a positive experience,
Uh-huh.
and it's always made me realize how important and how impactful I can be with my son-in-laws because I've got 3 daughters
Uh-huh.
and 3 son-in-laws, and so
Oh,
we have the potential to really love someone to Jesus and then lead them and guide them and help them. So she was initially probably one of my very first um, people that was very influential. Now, the one of the ladies that was part of getting me to the Lord, she's
mhm.
still in my life as well today. And so she was huge in getting me to the Lord. But I mean, I probably talked to her this week at some point, so she's still kind of a mentor in a way for me. It'll be funny. She'll say things like, well, you teach me now. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. You know,
Yeah.
so I have had a lot of different, and I would say, as far as like being in the Word, Beth Moore was a Bible study author
Yeah.
that's where I started. You know,
Yeah.
after the Revelation study, that was a study
Yeah.
written by David Jeremiah. But the next study I did was a women's Bible study that I went to, and it was Beth Moore. And the very first video that I watched of her, and this was a long time ago, she had really big hair then, and and she was so passionate, and so you could just see it, you know. And I went home that day and got on my knees by my bed, and I said, I don't know what that woman's got, but I want it. And I did not want to teach. That's not what I meant.
Yeah.
I just wanted
Yes.
whatever I could see that had so inspired her, that she was that passionate, and God gave it to me. Now, he ended up calling me to teach, and not at all part of my plan, you know.
Exactly.
But he did.
Right. So now it's like you have a peace that surpasses all understanding because you know what God has called you to do.
Right.
That's powerful. That's powerful. So what advice would you give my listeners if they sense God is calling them?
Well, pray, of course. You know, when I very first knew that the Lord was calling me, I spent about 3 months truly just praying. And I would say to the Lord every morning, here I am, send me, I'll go. But I didn't know anything.
Right.
Well, it was my mother-in-law, called her. So I think that's important, is you've got to have somebody that you trust, that you know is a really good, solid, godly, grounded in the Word kind of person that you can go to and talk to. So it was my mother-in-law. And I told her 3 months after God had called me that I thought he was calling me. And she said, well, have you talked to your pastor? And I was very close to my pastor, loved him dearly and all of that. But he was the last person I thought to talk to.
Yeah.
And she said, he's God. I said, I don't want anybody to direct me. I want to make sure that God is leading what I'm doing, you know. And she said, well, I think you need to go talk to your pastor. He is your shepherd that God's put in your life. And I think you should. And so I did. And it was funny because the day before I went to see him, they had the church staff had met together and determined they were going to ask me if I would lead the women's ministry. So it was really another God thing, you know, moment.
Yeah. Well, you know, you definitely have the passion. I can feel it. I can see it. There'll be listeners that will hear it and can feel it as well. It's contagious. It's like, okay, I want what she has because I'm feeling like she was years ago. And if she can transform based on what she's been through, I want that. And like we say, it doesn't hurt to try. I mean, I think about what is it? What can you lose?
Right.
You know? Yeah. So thank God you have gotten out of your way. How can my listeners get in touch with you?
Well, my website is onfire-ministries.org. And so I have free resources on there, biblical resources, and then I have some different Bible studies. My latest Bible study that you had mentioned is My Maker and Me, and it is a Bible study based on what Isaiah 64:8 says, that God is our potter and we are the clay. We're all the work of his hands. So it's very much about that. So that's one thing. And, you know, I don't know if you would mind me just sharing something I feel like the Lord's put in my heart as we are talking. But, you know, we're talking a lot about in the past of like pre-Jesus and after Jesus. I don't want to give this illusion that nothing bad or difficult happened after, because I did, you know, especially being in ministry. I mean, ministry has caused me some grief and heartache that I didn't think I would survive at times.
Right.
But
Oh.
I will tell you, I went to the Lord. I'm talking, I have stomped my feet with him. I have been on my face crying like a big baby with him,
Yep.
just throwing a fit. And
know.
I have that kind of relationship with the Lord. And I think he's okay with that.
Yes.
You know, you think about
Yes.
David. David,
Yes.
I think it's Psalm 55 where David says that he prayed that God would kill his enemies and send them to hell. I mean,
Yes,
he
he did.
prayed real prayers. And I think
Yes.
we've got to be okay with having that kind of real,
Mhm.
raw, kind of
Mhm.
authentic relationship with the Lord. And I think he loves it. So
Mhm.
I guess I just didn't want it to be like, okay, I got Jesus and everything has been amazing and perfect, because it's been hard.
Yes.
It's been some hard
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
But like you said, I still got peace that passes understanding.
Yeah.
I've got something that overrides every bit of that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad you shared that, because I remember when I gave my life over to Jesus, I thought everything was going to be great. And it was for about a month. Then after that, I'm like, what happened?
Wait a minute.
You know, it's kind of like, what happened? What happened?
Mhm.
So you're right. Everything's not going to be roses, but it'll be
Right.
better than it was.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be better than it was. Oh my gosh. What a blessing you have been on my podcast today, discovering purpose after seasons of brokenness and poor choices. It was my pleasure. My listeners, like I always say, live in a way that maximizes your personal happiness, your authenticity, even your fulfillment, as opposed to just going through the motions. You know,
Mhm.
live in that way and act in alignment with your values, which is important, your well-being, and start pursuing the truth.
Mm.
Start pursuing the truth rather than just dreaming about it. Pursue it.
Yes.
Again.
Love that.
Yeah. So thank you so much. God bless you. Continue to work in your life. And I'm just enamored in response to how your energy has just penetrated through this podcast.
Oh.
And I am hopeful that somebody will be blessed by what they've heard today.
Amen. Me too.
Yeah. Again, Pat, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes.